It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and action.
It's about to go down, y'all. I'm Cathey Armias.
And I'm Mark Williams. And Cathey is an awesome TED talker, TED coach, and TED organizer, and a persuasion and marketing expert.
Oh, and Mark, he is an international and champion speaker and coach, and he is one big ball of fire. We have with us today Jennifer Gu. I am so excited to have Jennifer on our show. She's 15 years old, and when she was 9, she went to her first Toastmasters club with her mom, and she joined when she was 12. And now she is on a mission. Her idea is to make every kid in the world more confident and a better public speaker. Welcome, Jennifer, to our show. We are so excited to have you.
Yes, indeed.
Jennifer, let me ask you this. Where was that point where you switched from like, okay, I'm going to Toastmasters to I want every kid in the world to be more confident and to be into public speaking? Because let's face it, not a lot of kids go, I'm totally into public speaking.
Not a lot of adults are into it.
That's true. It's not a lot of adults either.
Well, I think I was doing Toastmasters for a while, and then somewhere in the middle of that, I joined the Princeton Learning Experience, but as a youth teacher, not doing Toastmasters there at all. And I started teaching these kids subjects like reading and debate. And then I was like, well, I really like teaching these kids, but I also do Toastmasters besides that. So why don't I combine them? I want to be able to help these kids with their public speaking skills. So it would be amazing if I could use like this platform, which was pretty national already. And there were a few people, like a few students that were outside of the country. So why couldn't I use that platform to create a Toastmasters club that was accessible to all kids and all youths? So I could help them practice their public speaking skills and improve just like I had with my local Toastmasters club.
Now, Jennifer, there's a part of this that's missing, right? Because you told us that you went to your very first Toastmasters meeting at 9 years old. I also remember you saying that your mother took you there. And I also remember you saying that you hated it.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh. So you're human, Jennifer.
Yes. What was it about public speaking that a 9-year-old Jennifer and probably a 59-year-old somebody else somewhere else on the planet hated about this experience?
Well, the first Toastmasters club that I had been to, it wasn't like the local clubs that I go to now. It was in, I think it was like in a company building. I'm not 100% sure. I don't exactly remember. But in the room, it was kind of like a classroom setting. So there were rows of seats, and I literally felt like I was at school. And I always sat in the very back of the classroom because I didn't want to participate at all. And I was just hoping that nobody would ever notice me so I wouldn't have to like give a speech or anything. And most of the time when I was there, I would just look at the clock on the wall because I'd just be begging that it would be over so I could go back home. And when I did give speeches, I just held a paper in front of my face because I was so terrified of like just being there. I think what made me hate it the most was because I just hated the environment. It wasn't that Toastmasters was, that specific Toastmasters was bad. It was just that I personally didn't know anybody at all. Surprisingly, everybody was older than I was, so it made me even more uncomfortable to be there. Whereas,
wait, there was no other 9-year-olds there with you? Is that what you're saying?
No, they were like all 10 to 12 years old, which at that time was a pretty big age difference.
Yeah. No, this is, well, first of all, Jennifer, it's funny because I think sometimes when you're in the middle of something, you don't know how special it is. Like when you said, oh, I sat in the back and I tried to disappear. I was like, there's no disappearing when you're the one that everybody's like, wow. And, I think you show I think you're showing you're already starting to show signs of like, I think what every adult feels when they take on a journey of trying to understand public speaking better. They probably sit in the back and, pray that nobody calls on them. I mean, that's a shared experience, right, Mark? So I want to know that moment when it switched though for you. So when did you start enjoying it? So it sounds like a lot like the environment needed to not replicate a classroom. Is that right? Like when did you finally, what was the day? And it may not be one day, it might've built up, but when was that time period where you came home and you told your mom, I'm so excited about this. Like I actually really enjoy this. I remember I used to read off of a page. I remember that I hated it, but now I love it somehow. And now I want to teach it to other people.
Well, actually, the first Toastmasters club that I was just talking about, I quit it like after 3 months. But when I was 12, I joined a completely different one. It was local. A very few of my friends went there along with some people that I personally knew at school. So we were classmates and we were familiar with each other. And the environment, it wasn't like in like a building or anything. It was just in somebody's house. We would take turns hosting the meetings in people's and families' houses. So it was pretty homey. It was an easygoing environment, yet people still motivated each other. They still encouraged each other. And I really liked how we were all familiar with each other. So we could easily see each other improving, getting better at public speaking, becoming more confident people. That environment was just so friendly and it was so supporting. And that's basically what made it click for me. Like I started enjoying public speaking then.
I love that. It just became more personal.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, let's start to break down the idea a little bit, Jennifer. So, okay, what we do as coaches, Mark and I, is we take somebody that's already doing something amazing, right? They have this idea and they want to share it with the world more. And so we help them really like polish the idea, and sometimes when an idea is really close to you and you're living it, it's hard for you to see, like, how do you present it back to the Jennifer that's 9 years old that hates it? How do you present it back? How do you go backwards? And so that's our job, is like try to break this down. So let's talk really quick about, let's try to uncover some of the things that you want to bring this to kids. And I love that. If every kid by the time they graduated high school had already went through public speaking and they loved it, oh my gosh, they'd be more confident. They would understand what leadership's all about. They would understand the power of their words, good and bad. I mean, there's so many great things that they would understand, so much more than people that just say, oh, I hate that. That's a thing. Like, I'm never going to have a job that speaks. Yes, you will. You talk all the time. Unless you're going to be a mime and you're not going to, you're going to need to talk. So tell me, Jennifer, some of the things that you're seeing now we're going outside of yourself really quick. Tell me, with some of the kids that you see, like, what's their biggest barrier? What makes them not want to do it? Let's start there.
Right. Well, I think with the students that I coach with Toastmasters right now and with my club members, when I first joined Toastmasters, that local club that I went to, I think the biggest barrier was that everyone tried to be too perfect, at least through what I saw. Everyone worked so hard to get a perfect speech. I know that when I had to do a speech at Toastmasters, I would spend literally the whole entire weekend not doing any homework, just working on that one speech. So I just think that everybody feels like they have to have a perfect speech in order to look good in Toastmasters, in that club. And the thing is, you don't really need to be perfect. Like playing a sport or practicing an instrument, public speaking is something that you can get better at. And it's something that you can definitely improve on. And even if those steps of improvement, it might not be as obvious as like you're getting better at math, it's still there, even if it's not obvious, even if it's still slow, it's still going to be there. So I think that people need to remember that they don't need to strive for perfection the very first few times that they do a speech, because you're always going to be improving. And the first time you do a speech, or even the first couple or several times you do a speech, it never has to be perfect. It just always has to improve, or at least try to make it improve.
Whoa.
Hey, yeah, that's good. That's good.
So good.
Right. Now I want to tie this into something you said earlier, because as someone with a background in education and seeing the classroom the way it was, right? The classroom, and correct me if I'm wrong, intensifies this feeling of having to be perfect, right? Like you're being graded for it. There's the teacher watching you. There's the adult and the other kids watching you. And they've all got their sheets because the teacher said, write down 3 things that you like and 2 things that your kid can improve. And you're like, everybody's judging me, right? And you feel like you have to be perfect. But then you said something earlier that potentially could be a very interesting idea. You talked about the environment. I'm wondering, was that same feeling or need to be perfect, did that still exist when you were around a group of friends in someone's home? Did that feeling still exist?
In a way, for me, it sort of existed. It was definitely a bit more lax, but for me, my parents always tell me that I'm a perfectionist because, like, even when I do homework, I always try to make it look really nice and perfect. So for me, it existed, but definitely not as much as it did in the very classroom-like environment. When I was in elementary school, I really enjoyed going to school because of friends, but I was always scared when the teacher would call on people or ask us to raise our hands, because I was always so scared that I would get the answer wrong or something bad would happen and I would look really bad. And that's, in a way, that's kind of what 9-year-old me felt at that very first Toastmasters club that I had been to. But when I was 12 years old and I joined that new club with the one with my friends in it, it still existed, but because I was familiar with these people, because it was a much better environment, and it felt like an environment that I could grow in, that I could be happy in, and people would definitely support me. I felt that I didn't always have to be perfect, and everybody makes mistakes. There was one time where I just completely forgot a part of my speech, and I just stood there for a solid 30 seconds. But that's completely fine because they still support me, and they know that I have my downfalls, but I'm still continuously improving.
Cathey, I asked that question because I'm curious about 2 things so far, 2 potential ways that Jennifer could take this idea, right? One is about how we traditionally teach kids about public speaking to build their confidence.
Yep.
And what may be a different way of doing it that especially a traditional school may not try, or traditional organization may not try. So that's why I wanted to really ask that question about taking it from a classroom formal setting into a more familiar, friendly setting, right? To build that confidence.
Marc, I think we also have to, in this kind of idea, there's layers of people that I think you want to try to reach. And so my brain's going like, are you really trying to reach the 15-year-old, the 14-year-old, 13-year-old? That might be harder. Do you try to reach the parent? Do you try to reach the schools? Like, who are we? I think we really need to think about who we're aiming this idea at too, you know, and we want to make it as universal as possible. But for instance, if we just made it towards the 15-year-olds or toward, you know, I'm not just 15, but you know, if we made it towards the kids, right? I wonder if that's the most successful way. Like, I'm just thinking, like, I think it takes a lot. I think every kid that you've ever, you know, you and I both ran youth clubs, probably 99.8889975, something like that, right? Of the kids, something like that. So not to be exact or anything, of the kids that came, when they first came, they were forced to come by their parents. I don't actually remember any one kid that came and just said, hey, I heard about it and I came. So that makes me think too, like, So is the really big idea that you make it so interesting that kids would want to come to it? Because then I think I think that's a cool, like, altruistic thing. But then I think that really takes a lot of pondering. Like, you really have to psychologically break that apart and go, what would make a kid want to come? Or do you show the teachers and the parents that this is really critical, and, cut out one sport or something a week and like make this part of a whole rounded, I had heard one time that if you want your kids, like as a parent, if you want your kids to get the best well-rounded human experience possible, you have them do a sport, you have them play an instrument, and you have them learn a language. And if you think about it, it hits all these different parts of the brain. But sometimes people that are intellectuals, they only do the intellectual things. Sometimes the people that are into the sports only do the sports things. And I think that was a way to say, hey, give your kid an experience all the way around. So what if we introduce this as another one of those components? Like, who doesn't speak? Like, who doesn't communicate? So I don't know, Jennifer, what do you think about, what are your thoughts on that? Just thinking about, like, because we're trying to help you. By the end of this show, we want you to go, oh, we've cut away a bunch of stuff, and now I understand how to, like, verbalize it or communicate it or pitch it or, to the right crowd. So what do you think?
What you said before about, like, the 99.998% of kids joining Toastmasters, but because they were forced to, their parents forced them to, that's more or less the same for my club. I think all my club members were forced to sign up because of their parents. But my goal as a coach not just as a coach, but as the president of this whole entire club, yes, it's very, very hard to get kids interested in public speaking. So most of the time I do try to appeal to parents because public speaking is really important. But as their coach, once they do become club members or my students, I do try my best to get them to realize that public speaking is important and that they should work hard at it. And I want them to feel like they want to improve on public speaking, and that they're not just doing it because their parents forced them to.
No, Jennifer, totally. You talked about something that, marketers know totally. When a company's trying to market to their, target market, who they view as their biggest potential market, they never try to give them everything all at once. That would just overwhelm people. So what you said is so beautiful, and you're already doing it right in that aspect. It's like, the idea gets people in the door. Jennifer gets people to stay. Like,
yes, yes.
We get them in, and we get them sold on that idea, right? But then when they come and have the experience, I love how thoughtful and empathetic you are, Jennifer. Like, you get people there, and you're like, my job as a coach and as the leader of this club is to make people feel the importance of it. So I love that. I think that we need to have a bigger level idea that universalizes to parents and educators that kids really need this. Like, kids need it. And once kids get into it, they don't hate it that much. Both of my kids personally went through I called my club Future Stars, and both of them went through it, and both of them hated it. I had an argument with them every single weekend that we were going, and both of them have independently told me, I'm so glad that you made me do that. As adults, they're both adults now. And so
I need that secret. My kids are like, oh, well, don't the secret's
just wait, just wait 10 years. The secret's just, you have to wait, because they didn't say it when they were still kids. I mean, my daughter now trains in her job, and she's like, I had no idea, but she does an art. She's a hairstylist, makeup artist. She didn't, in her mind, she probably didn't think I needed to use speaking. And now that she has to train other people, I think she realizes that. So I love, Jennifer, that what's happening is we're starting to see how much of it, this is very complex. This is not one of these things that you can just go, there's this great idea and everybody gets on board. Like, the kids are like, yeah, I'm not going to hang out with my friends. I'm going to come do public speaking,
in front of strangers.
Exactly. I'm going to do, I think they're just as scared too as everybody else. So I think it's more complex than that. So I love to break the idea down and really know who we're talking to, but really to show. And I mean, maybe part of the idea is, and I don't know, Marc, you have to tell me what you think about this, right? Because maybe part of the idea is to talk about, is to, uncover the elephant in the room. Yeah, we know that when you start, you're going to hate it. Or we know when the kids start, that's normal. Don't think that, if you're having to argue with your kids about doing something, understand that that's a normal. I mean, think about it. You don't like to public speak as the adult or as a parent, but
Right.
I think it's really selling the idea of why kids need it when they're young. That's my personal opinion.
Why do kids, Jennifer, need this when they're young?
Yes.
Right. We know that as they grow up and their careers and their professions, they need it. But why do they need it now?
I think boosting confidence, public speaking, boosting confidence and public speaking, it can be used when kids are younger. Students are more adaptable because they're younger. So it could apply to like future work, but also in school, not just in college and high school, but yes, including them, but also even in middle school, you might have to audition for some roles. I remember when I was in 6th grade, I auditioned for My School Musical, and I was absolutely terrified. I did not know what I was doing, and I ended up being like one of those extra people who just sing in the background. But
I've been there.
Yeah. I've been a tree in a play before. I understand.
But having this confidence can help you at an earlier age. I actually pretty recently, when I was at the end of 9th grade, so near, I would say May or June, I had to do an interview with the FBLA board, so the Future Business Leaders of America, like the business club board, and I was absolutely terrified. But with my public speaking skills, I practiced by myself, and then I started becoming more confident to do it. And some of that confidence, it was already like built off of, it was already from the confidence that I had gotten from being part of Toastmasters. And it really helped me a lot. And I ended up getting a position on the board, which I am so grateful for. So yeah, it can definitely, thank you. It can definitely benefit kids in that way. And not just in getting like opportunities at school, but it can also help you in life. Public speaking teaches you how to influence others. And influencing others, it's something that you need to do every single day in school and in your future career in college. And basically everything that you do, you're influencing others. And public speaking teaches you the best way to do that.
That's right.
Gosh.
Hey, Jennifer, what is it that most, I'm going to say kids, but it's probably adults too. What is it that most kids believe about public speaking that is completely wrong?
Great question, Mark.
That is a really good question. People think, yeah.
No, sorry. I was going to say the answer is pretty much everything, but that but we know better.
People usually think that public speaking is sort of like a talent that people are born with. When I was little, I never talked in class. The only time I would talk was like in lunch or recess with my friends. But it's really, I used to think that public speaking is a skill that people are born with. If you're an extrovert, you're probably good at public speaking. I was not an extrovert at all. I still am an introvert. So I used to think that public speaking isn't something that I could improve at. I was bad at public speaking, and that was that. And before I was doing public speaking, my mom sent me to a bunch of other things to try to boost my confidence. I took around like 6 years of singing lessons, and I did dance for a while too, but I did not like it at all. I was still a pretty like nervous person when it came to being in front of groups of people. So I was like, okay, if I can't do these things, then obviously I'm not going to get better at public speaking. But public speaking definitely is something that you can work with. like I mentioned before, you can practice to get better at it. And it might not be as obvious as other things, but you are going to get better at it with practice. I don't think that a single public speaker out there has been perfect since like age 5 or something. But it all took years of practice to get them to where they are today.
Yeah. You know, Mark, I really want to ask you about this because she said 2 things that were really good that I think we can start to, because she's saying like, I mean, we're just like, we are in violent agreement with everything you're saying, right? But now there's a huge like 80-foot wall between people that practice public speaking and people that don't. And you've already nailed and touched on some of the things, but you said a word that I thought was really critical. You said why it's critical for kids to do it when Mark asked you that was because kids are adaptable. I love that. That to me, that's a bigger factor. I tried to learn soccer as an adult and I learned it, but oh my goodness, 100,000 times harder because we make these like, you know, we set up these kind of, we set up systems for ourselves, even physically and the way we act and what we do. And we get in these ruts and these systems, but I love that you touched on that kids are more adaptable at that time. So that's a good time to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you really, that's why you're supposed to learn languages at a young age, because they say if you learn a foreign language, you can actually sound like, you know, you're a local. If you learn it as an adult, you may learn it, but you probably never will sound like the local, you know, and that's why it's critical. So you said that one. And then I really think, and a lot of people touch on this, so I feel like we'd have to go deeper in this area, but she said that it helps you in life. Like it's just going to help them in everything, but it sounds so grandiose somehow. It's so true though. Again, the wall between people that know and people that don't know, regardless of their age or whatever, it doesn't matter. Cause there's kids that now understand it as well. It's not just, you know, there's adults that don't understand it still. But how do we help her convey that that's a necessary thing and that they should start it as kids? Because that's really her idea. It's not, this really isn't open to, we're not trying to talk to adults, although an adult can listen to it and go, you know, I get it. But we're really trying to say why kids should start it. So they're adaptable and it will help them with everything in life are 2 things that stood out for me. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
My wondering is the idea around why we should teach this or to young kids, or is the idea around how to teach it to young kids? I'm only thinking because, like you said, you and I have done youth groups, right? And the parents, for lack of a better term, force their kids to take it, right? Yes. And the reason why the parents force their kids to take it is because the parents have an understanding. We'll call it a why. They've got their why. They believe their why. I think what a lot of people struggle with is, but how do you do it?
So that's
how do I get my kid
Mark,
to speak up?
That's really, I love that you showed a different light on this, because maybe also through talking about how you do it, it automatically also answers the question of why you should do it. You know what I mean? Right. Maybe if you talk so much about how you do it, I love that, Mark. I think that's brilliant because Jennifer, so imagine this, you know, we kind of talked about your experience about how you started and the things that you didn't like from the environment. You were staring at the clock. It was, you know, all these things. But when it was done in a different way, it was still not as easy because you're a perfectionist. I gave you a thumbs up because I'm a massive perfectionist. It's very good and it's very bad, all wrapped up into one. So I get it. But maybe we talk about like, what are you doing different? How are you doing it? And maybe that is, you're right, Mark. Maybe that's the idea. And maybe that also helps bring in the you should do it crowd.
Yeah. Like, how do you teach kids how to become better at public speaking? How do you teach that? Any ideas, Jennifer?
Yeah, Jennifer. And to you.
That is a really great question. I am still working on it with my kids, well, my students, my club members. When I first started Toastmasters, when I first started my own Toastmasters club, people weren't willing to participate that much. They usually stayed quiet when I asked them questions. And sometimes they didn't really prepare for their roles before the meeting actually started. Mm-hmm. And I decided that I had to change up my teaching style to fit the students' needs. And so one of the biggest things that I did was to try to tell them more about like my own experience. Before, my teaching style was very, okay, here are the directions. This is what the manual says. You can do it. And if you need help, you can just ask me any questions you have or whatever. But by telling them my own experiences of how I used to be super shy in class and in school and in my extracurriculars too, and doing Toastmasters and how it helped me change into a more confident person and a person that is better at public speaking than before, relatively. I was hoping that I could, in a way, motivate them to work harder at public speaking, to make them have the mindset like, oh, she did it, well, maybe I can do it too. And I also try to encourage them. Encouragement always goes a long way. When sometimes my students, the club members, they might not do perfect with timing or like small things like that. Maybe they get too many ahs or ums in a speech, but that's completely fine, because what we do have to remember is that maybe the speech sounded better, maybe they told a story that connected with the audience, or maybe the timing was better and longer than last time, maybe they were more confident. Those are the things that we should remember, celebrate, and support them with. And,
Cathey, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just going to say that's what I think is most important.
Cathey, I was going to ask you, because we always talk a lot about concepts, right? And I heard this word directions or instructions, right? It sounds like, and I heard the word change, so I really gravitated towards change. You know, changing your teaching style, changing the environment you spoke about earlier, changing from giving directions to talking about your own experience, changing from giving instructions too. And so, Cathey, I'm just picking your brain for a moment about this concept in this on, right? We want to hear Marc talk about not sensational, but sincere, right? Great concept. I'm wondering what kind of concept is there out there about going from giving directions or giving instruction to what?
Yeah, you made me think about how that's so good, Marc. You made me really, and Marc Brown's like, yeah, I love really thinking about it. It's funny too, because we're speakers and we're speaker coaches, and now we're coaching a speaker coach as well, Jennifer, right?
Yes.
So I feel like this whole thing is just like one big, it's funny you're talking. And so I thought about that. What if you said something like, speaking is not about speaking, it's about changing and growing, or something like that. Like the tagline could be somewhere around that. People always think speaking's about speaking. Like many times when I'm working with adults and when I work with the ones that are really nervous about standing on a stage, I'm like, I keep telling them it's because you care too much about you. You're worried about how you're going to say it wrong, or are you going to stutter, or so you're thinking it's about the speaking, and it's not. They're listening going, hey, I don't care if you stutter the whole time. I don't care if you were wearing one earring and forgot to wear the other. I don't care if your shoe was untied. If I start to listen to you and you make a change in my life, like you change the way I think, then I don't care about all those things, And so speaking really isn't about speaking, which is crazy. But she already knows that. Like Jennifer, you already know that. You've already identified that speaking is about confidence building. Speaking's about doing something more. And you alluded to this, which I always loved. When I first joined Toastmasters in 2003, like so long ago, Jennifer, I remember being there and going, I know, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, going on 20 years. But I remember, Jennifer, that I would go, and then I started telling newcomers, I would go, you will never learn in any one meeting everything you need to know. It's like you're gathering little pieces of nuggets of knowledge and experience, and you're putting them into your basket of what makes you who you are and how you think. And that's the gift that you give people. And when you give it to kids, you just give them a bigger head start. So it's not about speaking. I mean, and maybe that's the thing that we have to switch up, Mark. You're right. It's about changing. It's not about speaking. Speaking's not about speaking. Speaking's about changing people's minds, changing how you react, changing your confidence, changing, your position in life. There's so many things that changes, but it's not really about speaking.
Yeah. So many people think that doing a speech is like going to school. It's like rote memorization where you just memorize the words and say them maybe with a microphone, maybe on a stage. But it's actually, like you said, it's much more than that. Public speaking definitely has helped me grow so much as a person. I'm definitely more confident now. Instead of just being part of Toastmasters, I started my own Toastmasters club, which just shows like that amount of growth. It's amazing what public speaking can do to you.
That's so impressive.
It's so good. So maybe, I don't know, what do you think, Jennifer? Do you agree with the line, speaking's not about speaking's about growing? Maybe that's the word. Maybe it's not changing, it's growing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because speaking isn't about speaking, it's about growing. So changing, you are changing, but growing, I feel like it makes more sense because you're growing into not a completely different person like changing is, but you're starting to get a different mindset. You're starting to become a more confident person. You're starting to think about how to influence others. And that's what public speaking can do to you. It's really amazing.
You're flexing your public speaking muscle.
It is a gym. Gym.
Think about the gym analogy though. When you lift weights, right? What do you actually do? You tear your muscles. They actually tear. Yeah. The lining of your muscles tears. And then and it allows for the muscles to get larger, to expand. So it's kind of the same thing with speaking. You're tearing down what you thought it was speaking, right? And you're growing and expanding. That's why I think the growing thing really works. I really like that.
Yeah.
I like the growing thing also because how it's about building confidence in young children. But yet even confidence is so much, confidence doing what? Speaking? And no, I think growing is definitely a different word that we don't often hear. And so I like the change in the way the concept and the idea is coming out. Right? Yeah. And I can see how, I could see how, whether it be going on a stage, writing a book, or starting multiple clubs, or as an entrepreneur, starting multiple youth organizations across the country, I can see how speaking is not about speaking, but it's about growing, and then taking the opportunity to teach us how do we grow. Because I go back to that idea, we know why we need to grow, but we don't know how to grow. And that's what people are looking for. So I think Mark, there's a critical idea here.
I love that. Nice. I love that, Mark. And I think when you do hit that, and that might be the center point, right? That speaking is not about speaking, it's about growing. Because then that's the center point between why should you do it and how do you do it, right? That's kind of the connecting piece. There were things that I had to do, Jennifer, hearing some of the things that you say, I'm sure Mark and I are just sitting there like nodding, like, yep, we have the same issues getting people to, kids to speak or kids wanting to memorize. And in the end, I tried some tactics too. I had to change. I did a thing where I had both of them watch a movie or watch a TED Talk, and then I assigned them, you have to give a bad review and you have to give a good review. Whether or not you liked it didn't matter. So it's almost like debate, right? Where you're just getting, forced into like having to, be a pro or con against something. But it's making it more like that it is not always a speech, like you said, standing on a stage, but speaking helps you grow. So just practice it more and more. You just got to be there doing it, regardless of how you're doing it, whether it's like table topics or it's, doing a review or it's debating. You make it fun for the kids. Kids like to argue. They really, as a general rule, kids like to argue. So maybe, it's in that space, but I don't know. What do you think about that, Jennifer?
I think that, okay, so there is a very strong connection between public speaking and debate, but I actually used to do debate. I used to be not heavily involved, but pretty involved. There was a period of time where I really loved doing debate because I went to this debate camp and I got 4th place with my partner. It wasn't the best, but it was our first year doing it, so it was pretty good. And then I continued loving debate for 1 year. I think it was when I was in 8th grade. And in 9th grade, our school has a lot of debate teams in high school, like Model UN, and there was forensics debate. I auditioned for Model UN because, that is the debate team that all students want to get into. And I didn't end up making it, so I stopped doing debate. But it just shows that so many kids, even if they're younger and even if they're older, in high school, everybody loves doing debate, and there's such a strong connection between that and public speaking. But there is a difference, and I think it's that when you're doing debate, you're arguing a lot, and there's a lot of research and information behind it. Whereas in public speaking, especially in Toastmasters, mainly in Toastmasters, you have such a supportive environment most of the time. And by practicing public speaking, you're boosting your confidence a lot more than you would do in debate, because in debate, you're practicing how to argue and what certain points to make. And especially, at least in my school, the audition process was so hard, and it was saying that if you're already confident, then we'll take you. But if you're not confident yet, then we won't take you.
That's a good differentiation point. No, that's really good. And by the way, I need to strike my comment. Not all kids like to argue. I guess just my kids. I'm just going to put that in there. My kids love to argue. So I can't put that out into the world for everybody. But no, I love that, Jennifer. But I don't know, Mark, what do you think? For me, I didn't bring up debate to say that to replace public speaking. I just think that there's ways that we did, there's tactics that I did to make when kids came to our, future stars, to make it more fun for them. And that was something that they really connected. And then you can build on that. But again, it just kind of goes back to this idea that when you're speaking, you're growing. If you're not speaking or you're not doing it, you're not growing in that area. And so that might be another way to say it, and that might be a way to say it once people are inside internally. But again, your idea has to encourage, I think, people to want to take a closer look at why and how. Mark was so brilliant to bring in the how, but why and how are we going to take kids? And you said this, Jennifer, and they're adaptable at that moment. How are we going to use that beautiful art form, this art form that's been around forever, right? And utilize it to make kids stronger communicators, stronger leaders, stronger business people, better parents, better friends, better, it just, you said it helps you in life. So I think that's, I don't know. I'm in this moment right now. I'm stuck on that I think there's something to grow upon from that. Speaking is not about speaking, it's about growing.
It's about growing. And what I am also hearing that is a cross benefit is we go back to the parents who force their kids to take these classes, or they take their 9-year-old daughters to a Toastmasters meeting, right? And they do it and the kids hate it, right? Or if the kids are slightly older, they're old enough to say, Mom, I'm not doing that. Dad, I'm not doing that. Don't take me there, right? But if this idea that speaking is not speaking, speaking is about growing, maybe that's a move towards getting kids also to be willing to try it. Because that's a big stumbling block, right? How do you convince people to actually get up there? By changing their perspective of what it is. It's not about speaking, it's about growing.
And then that ties back to you, Jennifer. You talked, when you share your personal story, I think you do make a big impact because you're saying, hey, I'm a kid and I just want to tell you, I'm in the same boat you are, but I chose to go this route and I grew. This is how I grew. So your story is a growth story. When you share your story to kids, you're sharing your story of growth.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that, if I were to like take what we said at the beginning, because, sometimes the biggest problem with an idea is there's too much information into it. And so you gotta get people to understand the concept like immediately. And at the beginning, public speaking, kids need to do it. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things we can add to that. But if you kind of hone in on one point, and sometimes, Jennifer, like having a good idea is a really good idea, but there's like 1,000 angles you could hit it from. You could say, oh, you grow from it. Oh, you could go on to become, a CEO. There's so many different angles you could hit, but I kind of like this general area of just growth. It's not really about the speaking. It's about the growth. So
well, yes.
I think that's made up. No, go ahead. Yeah. Go for it, Mark. Yeah. Nope. We're thinking the same thing.
we are. And Jennifer, I was going to ask you, because I love the way that Cathey sort of, surmised that, right? I'm curious from you. We started off with, I want to help kids around the world to become more confident with public speaking. That's where we started. For you, how has your idea evolved for you? What's been the biggest change in your idea since we started this conversation?
Well, in the very beginning, it was, like you said, I want to help those kids become better at public speaking, and especially to become more confident. And now it's more of a conversation of where speaking it's like I want to help these kids get better at public speaking, because public speaking can help you grow. And boosting confidence, it is a part of public speaking. Boosting confidence, it is a part of growth. But growth just has such a wider range to it. It is a lot more general. And I think that even to kids who are already confident, maybe they didn't do public speaking, maybe they did like something else, maybe singing or anything else that made them more confident, they could still use public speaking to help them grow in other areas.
Yes.
Yeah, and that would be more applicable to everybody rather than just kids who want a boost in confidence.
Oh, wow. Jennifer, you have this great way of that was amazing. I don't know if this happened to you, Mark, but when I first joined Toastmasters, I am extroverted, Jennifer. So I am that person you were talking about before. And I remember when I went to Toastmasters, I'm like, I'm actually not afraid to get on a stage and speech. See, that's why I needed Toastmasters. You need to be able to say the words right. I told myself like, I'm not afraid. And then when I started listening to other people, I go, oh, but I'm not very good at I'll just keep talking. And so I learned that the growth I needed wasn't in the confidence. And that's the thing. You're right. The growth is such a bigger word. I was like, oh, I need to grow more into preparing. I need to prepare better. I need to be more concise with my words. I need to use powerful words and powerful concepts. So there was things that I grew in that were beyond confidence. So you're right. I love how you summarize that. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, we so appreciate having you on the show. We think what you're doing is beautiful and amazing, and you are so intentional about it, and we love that from you. And think of all the people that you're going to help. And I just want to tell you one thing, because I now have kids that went through my Future Stars. Now, this is 15, 16 years later. One's a huge TV producer now, and another one's like an executive at a Fortune 500 company. And
nice.
You don't know the impact that you're making right now. Like, you don't understand how much of an impact you're making. You might think you do, but you just don't know, because some of the kids that you're involved with, even some of the parents, like, they are going to grow. They're going to continue to grow And one day you're going to hear something later like, oh my gosh, I can tie it back to back then when I was fumbling, trying to read my paper and doing speeches. But, so I don't know, Marc, what do you think?
I think that's fabulous. I think you are fabulous. I hope that there are parents out there who will be inspired by the conversation and the idea today. If they were not thinking about getting their kids involved in not only sports and not only music and not only another language, but around speaking so that they can grow. I hope that a lot of parents will look for opportunities like the many different clubs and branches of the clubs that you have created and follow the suit of a Jennifer Gu so that they are no longer 9-year-olds who hate speaking in front of people, but they are young adults who are embracing not the speaking, but who are embracing their growth.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing, Marc. Yes. Yes.
Well, listen, I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. I hope that everybody enjoyed what Jennifer had to bring to the table. And Jennifer, I hope that you gained a lot or grew a lot and saw that your idea grew a lot. We'd love to be able to follow up with you at some point and find out what 15, 17, 27-year-old Jennifer is doing to help people grow. You are fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. I keep saying that again. And to anybody who's watching, young, old, or in the middle, whether you're afraid to speak or you embrace your growth, if you have an idea that you'd like to drop on the world and you'd like to join Cathey and I for a conversation about your idea, send us an email at Marc and Cathey, that's MarcandCathey. You got to get it right if you want to get your idea to be evolved. marcandcathey@gmail.com. And we would love to have you on another episode in the future on It's About to Go Down.
Yeah.